This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Hindu's In Focus podcast. I'm Sharmada Venkatasubramanian, your host for this episode. On September 9th, 2025, Israeli forces launched an attack in Qatar in what is being seen as an unprecedented escalation beyond the Gaza conflict. The strike rattled Qatar, which has hosted Hamas's political office for years and positioned itself as a key mediator in ceasefire and hostage negotiations. While Israel claims the strike was aimed at Hamas's leadership, it has triggered wider concerns about violations of sovereignty, the safety of negotiations, and the future of diplomacy in West Asia. So what does this escalation mean for Qatar's role as mediator? How does it affect the future of negotiations with Hamas? Is Israel signaling a new phase in its regional strategy? And what might this mean for US allies and European powers navigating the fallout? To discuss all these questions and more, we are joined by Stanley Johny, The Hindu's international affairs editor. Stanley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sharmada.
To start with, what exactly happened in Doha and what do we know about Israel's target and the immediate aftermath of the attack?
So the Israelis, if you look at the statements issued by the Israelis as well as the Americans and the Qataris, that Israel carried out an airstrike targeting a house where Hamas leaders were actually gathering to discuss a peace proposal which the Trump administration had put forward. So Israel claims that this attack was aimed at Hamas, and Israel is also accusing Qatar of providing refuge to Hamas. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said even after the attack that if Qatar government doesn't bring Hamas to justice, we will. He says Israel will. That is kind of a threat. On the other side, President Trump says that he is unhappy about what happened. So this is, we don't know the details about how the attacks were actually carried out, what weapons Israelis had used, or from where did they launch the airstrikes, etc., etc. Those details are yet to be known. But I think, this is a long operation. The Israeli flights, they must have taken off from Israel and then moved towards the Persian Gulf region. And from the Persian Gulf, they might have carried out an attack. And that attacking a specific building where Hamas leaders were present to discuss a particular proposal provided by the United States. So it's possible that there were high-level intelligence cooperation and logistics support between the United States and Israel. Contrary to some other reports that suggested that the Americans were not known in advance. But I think that there could be, without close cooperation with the United States, this kind of a complex operation are unlikely to be executed. So, this is how the whole attack unfolded.
Right. So, as we know, Doha is not just any other city. Qatar has hosted Hamas's political office for years and has been a key mediator in ceasefire and hostage talks as well. So why was Doha significant in this context, and how does that explain Israel's choice of target?
If I talk about Israel's choice of target first, you see from October 7, 2023, Israel has attacked a number of Arab countries in the name of going after Iran's proxies. Israel is been bombing Lebanon. Even yesterday, Israel carried out a major attack in Lebanon. Israel keeps attacking the Houthis. In the case of Houthis in Yemen, at least the Houthis are also firing back, so it is firing and counter-firing. And Israel has been carrying out attacks in Syria, and these attacks started immediately after October 7. The Israelis started targeting Iranian generals and Hezbollah commanders in Syria. They also bombed the Iranian embassy in Syria in April 2024. And then the Israelis targeted Iran itself, which led to the brief war in June between Israel and Iran, the 12-day war, and now Qatar. So the difference, as you pointed out, between Qatar and all these countries, Lebanon, all said and done, is a failed state. The government is not effective in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a much bigger military force than the Lebanese army in Lebanon. And the Lebanese army is incapable of defending itself, though the Israelis have a free hand. And Syria, again, the government collapsed. Even the Bashar al-Assad government itself was weak, and the Assad government collapsed. And now you have a government run by this former Al-Qaeda militant, Johny, who was unwilling to stand up to the Israelis. So Israel continues to carry out attacks. Iran is the only country that retaliated to the Israeli attack. That's why we had the war. But Qatar, compared to them, is an American ally. And Qatar hosts the largest U.S. military base in West Asia, the Al Udeid military base. And Qatar is also an influential, rich Persian Gulf kingdom, which is also a source of energy, particularly the LPG and LNG, liquefied natural gas, for which the world is dependent on Qatar. So it's a tiny monarchy, tiny kingdom, but it's a very influential country, and which is in close alliance with the United States. So by attacking such a country, that itself makes it different from Israel's other military operations in the region. So this is the first time Israel is directly targeting a Persian Gulf kingdom, an American ally, and Israel seems to be getting away with that. This actually marks, on the one side, this marks an escalation in the regional conflict. And on the other side, this is pretty significant because if you look at it from Qatar's point of view, as I said earlier, Qatar is an American ally. Qatar hosts American military base. Qatar keeps very warm relationship with the Trump administration. President Trump was in Doha earlier this year, and Qatar went overboard to please him by gifting a luxury jet to the Americans. And the United States had accepted the gift. The Trump administration accepted the gift. But none of this matters. None of this provides security to Qatar against attacks by America's closest ally in the region. So this also marks a new beginning. On the one side, this is an escalation of the regional conflict which we are witnessing. And on the other side, this marks a new beginning because the bedrock of the relationship between the United States and the Arab allies is that their alliance with the United States would provide them security. Because this goes back in time, to the 1940s, when the American president met the Saudi king Abdulaziz, and offered security in return for oil. So ever since, the bedrock of the relationship is the promise of American security. And later on, in the 1970s and the 1980s, other Gulf kingdoms also signed up for this kind of a security partnership. Now, what we are witnessing is that the security promise is being diluted, or the Americans are complicit in Israel's attack against Qatar. So this marks a new beginning as well.
Right. Like you just mentioned, so Israel has obviously carried out a lot of operations before, but rarely in the Gulf. So would you say this marks a new phase in its military doctrine as well? Do you think it's significant in that sense?
So, on the one side, Israel's attack in Qatar was a failure because if you look at the statements coming out of Doha, Israel wanted to assassinate Hamas's top leaders, which includes Khalid Mashal. Khalid Mashal was there in Doha. But Hamas says its entire top leadership survived the Israeli attack. Only low-level officials were killed. So Israel failed to meet its objective on the one side. And on the other side, it has already hit an influential Arab kingdom here and triggering sharp responses from across the world. From the UK to France, the British Prime Minister said he condemns Israel's attack. France has also responded pretty strongly. And even India doesn't want to, even otherwise, India doesn't want to upset the Israelis. I mean, India means this current government. But even the Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted, without naming Israel, of course, but still, he used the word India condemns, which the MEA or the Indian establishment rarely uses when it comes to other countries. We condemn terrorist attacks, but we seldom condemn actions by other governments. But here, India says India condemns the violation of Qatar sovereignty, which the Prime Minister himself had tweeted. I find it a pretty strong statement. So the Israeli attack, triggered sharp responses from both Israel's critics as well as its friends and partners. So that is one thing. But if you look at Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement, so he doesn't seem to be backing off, and rather he is issuing more threats to Qatar. He says that if Qatar continues to host Hamas, or if they don't bring Hamas, to justice, according to him, we will do that. So, which was a direct threat to Qatar. This clearly shows that Israel seems intent on escalating the conflict rather than bringing it to an end. And interestingly, the Qatar attack happened a week after Hamas accepted the latest US proposal. So, Israel says that the war will over tomorrow if Hamas is ready to release all the hostages. And Hamas says that it is ready to release hostages as part of a ceasefire deal that would bring the war to an end, permanent end. And Hamas leaders had said that they accepted the latest proposal put forward by the mediators, but Prime Minister Netanyahu had rejected that proposal immediately after Hamas accepted the proposal. And then the US President Donald Trump said that this is the only deal. He put forward another proposal, and the Hamas leaders were discussing this particular proposal in this location in Doha, and that's when the Israelis struck, which means Netanyahu doesn't seem to be interested in peace at all. So he says that he's still pursuing his goal of obliterating or destroying Hamas, and he says that he is willing to do that wherever Hamas is, which means this is an open threat that he might target Qatar again, despite the pressure he is coming under. So the question here is that, on the one side, it is very clear that the Israelis are not very keen on pursuing peace, because the importance of Qatar is not just that it is an American ally. The importance of Qatar is that it is also a key mediator in this conflict, because Hamas leaders are there in Qatar. And Qatar had played this role of a mediator pretty effectively in the past, because they mediated between the United States and the Taliban. They offered Doha, for talks between these two, which basically brought to an end the American invasion of Afghanistan. So Qatar has been trying to mediate between Hamas and the Israelis as well, for the past 20 odd months. But now by attacking Hamas in Qatar, Israel had practically torpedoed the whole peace process, or the efforts to bring the war to an end diplomatically. This is one key consequence of this attack.
On that note, would you say targeting negotiators is now a de facto official policy of Israel? And would you say that the line between political actors and combatants has been erased in this case?
Israel doesn't care, does it? Because, there are interesting parallels between the attack on Qatar and the attack on Iran. The Americans were in an advanced stage of negotiations with the Iranians in June 2025, earlier this year. June 15th, they had set a date for their 6th round of talks between Steve Witkoff, who was Trump's envoy, and the Iranians. And the talks were expected to take place in Muscat in Oman. And then on June 12th, the Israelis carried out the attack. There were talks that the Israelis might attack Iran, but the Iranians never expected that they would attack Iran when the Iranians were still in talks with the Americans. What everybody thought was that if the talks collapsed, the Israelis might carry out an attack. And Trump himself said on June 11th that they were making progress in talks. And then June 12th, the Israelis start attacking Iran. That basically destroyed the whole diplomatic process, because the Trump administration was basically forced to join the war. In the subsequent days, the United States will join the Israelis to bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities. It's interesting because on the one side, the Israelis destroyed Trump's diplomatic engagement with the Iranians, and the same Trump would join Israel's war against Iran. So practically one of the immediate effect of Israel's bombing was the destruction of the whole diplomatic process. The same thing is happening now in front of our eyes. Qatar is the mediator, and Hamas had already accepted a proposal. And in Qatar, in Doha, Hamas leaders were discussing a proposal given by or endorsed by the Trump administration. And then the Israelis are attacking the same Hamas leaders who were there discussing the peace proposal. So which means Israel doesn't want peace, or they are not very keen on bringing the war to an end through an agreement. That's not their interest. So they did not want a nuclear agreement between the Americans and the Iranians, and they do not want a hostage, come ceasefire agreement with Hamas. The Israelis wanted to continue the military operation of Gaza, irrespective of the pressure they are under. They wanted to continue the particular military operation in Gaza City, which is a famine-stricken land where more than 100,000 people are living, and these people, more than 1 million people are living, and these 1 million people are now being forced out of their 10 camps, and they are being displaced multiple times, and they are being pushed to the south of Gaza But that's what Israel wants to continue. Israel doesn't want to end the war through talks. So that's why they carried out the attack. So if you ask me whether this is a new norm, my answer is that Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't seem to care. So he just wants to continue to bomb at his will. He wants to bomb Syria. He wants to bomb Lebanon. He wants to bomb Iran. He wants to bomb now Qatar as well.
Do you think Qatar is likely to retaliate now?
I don't think so. I don't think Qatar will militarily retaliate.
What do you think are the implications of that restraint for its standing in the region?
So one of the immediate consequences of this attack is that the peace process could collapse. Qatari Prime Minister said that in as many words. He said that Israel has ended all hopes for the release of the hostages by this attack. But an interesting thing, what we witnessed was that, the UAE president was there in Doha yesterday. And the Saudi Crown Prince has issued a pretty strong statement. He called that a criminal act. He used a very strong statement to describe the Israeli attacks. So you see, everybody knows that there were differences of opinions between the Qataris and the UAE, the Qataris and the Saudis. But you see a united response by the Gulf Arab kingdoms towards the Israeli attack because they realize that Israel is completely uncontrollable at this point of time and they have total impunity. They are violating all kind of international laws and nobody is taking them to task. Okay, the Europeans are issuing some statement, but they are not doing anything more than that. And despite Trump's reported unhappiness, the Israelis continue to enjoy the support of the United States, the world's most powerful country. So with this kind of impunity, and as nobody is there to stop the Israelis or slow them down, the Arab kingdoms feel basically threatened by what Israel has just done to Qatar. So you see a newfound solidarity among these countries. So whether that will lead to any kind of tangible action is what we have to witness. Because after the Qatar attack, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had signed up for another settlement project in the West Bank. And then while signing up this settlement project, he said that there won't be any Palestinian state. Categorically, he said that. We reported that in the Hindu on 12th of September. So what does it mean? It means that the Israelis want to annex the West Bank. And the Emiratis, the UAE, has clearly said that if Israel goes ahead with their plan to annex the West Bank, and if the path towards a two-state solution is dead, which means if there is no Palestinian state, then the UAE will withdraw from the Abraham Accords, which is the normalization agreement between the UAE and Israel. So before October 7, what we witnessed was that there was a US-pushed diplomatic attempt to bring the Arab world and Israel together. The Americans are not particularly concerned about Palestinians. The Arab world was also not particularly, at least the Arab leaders, were not particularly concerned about the continuing occupation of the Palestinian territories. But October 7 and the post-October 7 Israeli war on Gaza changed the equation. And Saudi Arabia, which was in an advanced stage of normalizing ties with Israel, backed off. And now, after Qatar being attacked, I would argue that this Arab normalization process has further been derailed. And this is a serious setback because even when the war was going on, the diplomatic relationship between the Arab world and Israel survived. And the Saudis said that they would still be open for normalizing ties with Israel if Israel commits to a two-state solution, which is to the creation of a Palestinian state, which according to the Saudis should be based on the 1967 border and East Jerusalem should be its capital. But now, forget about the Palestinian state, which the Israelis themselves are saying that it's not going to happen. Netanyahu says this on record. There won't be any Palestinian state. And then in Gaza, this devastating war is going on, right? Some 70,000 people were killed. 2.3 million people were displaced. And hungry Palestinians are being shot dead while they are waiting for food. And the UN says that there is a man-made famine in Gaza. The world's leading genocide scholars are saying Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. So on the one side, Gaza is being devastated. And as if that's not enough, Israel is now expanding the regional conflict by attacking a Gulf country. So Saudi Arabia and even UAE, which has a normalization agreement with Israel. So what the question they would be asking is whether they should continue with the normalization process. So I think this is the immediate result is a setback to the peace process, the ceasefire peace talks, and the medium to long-term effect is a setback to the Arab-Israel normalization process. But besides this, I don't expect any kind of military retaliation from the Arab world's part towards Israel. That's unlikely to happen.
Right. And on the broader international stage, would you say this adds pressure on Europe to break away from the US stance, especially given such repeated mockery of international law?
Yeah. Europe has issued statements, as I said earlier, Prime Minister Starmer or President Macron, they all have issued relatively strong statement, but beyond that, will they do anything? I don't think so. They are unlikely to do that. What can they do? Usually what Europeans do is to impose sanctions on countries that violate human rights, countries that violate international law, etc., etc. Because right now, they are putting back sanctions on Iran, accusing Iran of violating the terms of the 2015 nuclear agreement, which was originally sabotaged by President Donald Trump in 2018 May. Will the Europeans impose sanctions on Israel over its wars? I don't think so. So they are taking some token measures, such as they have sanctioned a couple of extremist ministers in Netanyahu's government, and Germany had announced that they would cut supplies of some weapons to Israel that could be used in Gaza, etc., etc. And beyond that, no. The only European country that is making, that has actually taken a strong position is Spain. Spain has called what's happening in Gaza genocide and demanded strong European action, whereas other European countries, they raise some criticisms, but beyond that, they are unlikely to do anything, at least at this point of time.
Right. And finally, before I let you go, what does this recent attack tell us about the direction of the Gaza war? Are we looking at a dangerous new phase, or is this just another cycle of escalation and containment?
Yeah, what it tells me, it is basically, let's say, reinforcing my own assessment, which we've been discussing in Focus and in other write-ups in the Hindu, that Israelis are not really interested in ending the war in Gaza. Israel wants to continue the war. So what we are witnessing now in Gaza is a clear case of ethnic cleansing. So, see, the Palestinians in Gaza, 2.3 million people, have been displaced multiple times. And Israel wants to push them to a corner in the south, in Rafah, what they call a humanitarian city, which is actually a concentration camp. It's not my words. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert called it a concentration camp. So Israel wants to push the entire population of Gaza to the south. So now they are carrying out an operation in Gaza City in the north, where more than 1 million people are camping. They want to push them out, evacuate them. So Gaza City is basically a famine-stricken region. People don't have enough food. Children are dying of malnutrition and hunger. And Israel is bombing this particular region now. And they want to push them out. So they want to push them all to the south, to Rafah, and then push them out of Gaza, so that Israel can reoccupy Gaza Strip, can resettle Gaza with Jews. And there are Jewish organizations that are willing to move to Gaza and grab the Palestinian land and start settlements. And two Israeli ministers, Bezalel Smotrich, who is the finance minister, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the national security minister, pretty senior ministers, both of them have said that their ultimate objective is to conquest and cleanse Gaza. Cleanse Gaza. This is the word Smotrich used. Cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. So if you ask me, if the war comes to an end now, that would be tantamount to accepting defeat, because Netanyahu hasn't destroyed Hamas even after 23 months of the war. So he wants to continue the war. And when continue the war, he wants to make Gaza unlivable for the 2.3 million people, and then encourage them or push them out of Gaza, so that Gaza will be open and available for Israeli settlers, like the leaders like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. So what happened in Qatar sits pretty well with this assessment, because If Israel was interested in peace, they would have negotiated a peace deal. Instead, they are going after the negotiators in a country that has been hosting talks. So that what that tells us is that here they are not interested in peace. Rather, they want to continue the war. And that's what we are likely to get.
Right. That brings us to the end of this episode. I think we'll have to wait and watch where this war is headed and if there is possibility of peace eventually in the future. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Stanley.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharma.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.